Hey there. We're cooped up here. Um, my 6-year-old keeps demanding that I play Star Wars with him, so I've been playing video games this morning. I'm feeling kind of fleshy. Um, I want to get back into the Word, and hopefully he'll leave me alone. It's really something else. How I wonder how family dynamics are going to be stretched. So I want to go on with John 1, and we talked about the light that's shining in the darkness. And the darkness comprehended it not. Um, the Word is Christ, and Christ is the light, and the light is shining, but the darkness comprehended it not. So there's this light and darkness, right? We're really all in darkness. And until we're illuminated by Christ and we get saved, then we become light in the Lord. Um, and that's it's a miracle. I understand that there's a personal accountability. I'm not a Calvinist. There's personal accountability. We can harden ourselves. But this, the fact that we can believe and shine is a miracle because we were in darkness and the darkness didn't comprehend the light. So God had to do something to overcome the darkness in me. He had to capture me, really. I was running away from him, not running to him, and I realized that. It wasn't something good in me that was attracted to the light. No, the light is just that the darkness in me couldn't overcome the light, and the light shined on me. Um, so the light is shining, and then it says there was a man sent from God whose name was John. This is John the Baptist. The same came for a witness to bear witness of the light that all men through him might believe. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of the light. That was the true light that lights every man that comes into the world. Now you think, why, if Christ is the light, why can't he just shine on me? Why does he need a witness? And God's always done that. He has worked through witnesses. Even before the gospel, there was the witness of the prophets, the witness of the law. But even for those who didn't have that, they had the witness of their conscience, that there's a judgment to come, and the witness of creation. Creation itself is a witness to the light. Why doesn't God just shine directly on us? Why does he do it through witnesses? Well, we know that the scripture says that he dwells in unapproachable light and that he is a consuming fire, right? And that light is so bright that because we're in darkness, I don't think we could take it. We could not bear under the direct scrutiny of the light initially. Uh, So he filters the light through witnesses. And I remember taking my son to a museum about power plants or something, and it was talking about how there's the power plant, and there's this huge block representing all this undiluted power coming out. But then it goes through transformers, and the transformers subtract from the power and filter it down so that it can be fed safely into households. They resist some of that power and transform it. Now I don't know anything about electricity, but hopefully you know what I'm saying. For that power to get to my house to a point where it can delicately energize my house without consuming my house, it has to go through transformers and stuff to dilute it. And that is how God works in a way. He is this glorious light that is so bright, it's inapproachable. If we were to see him face to face, he said, "No one shall see my face and live." Right? So, not only did he become flesh, which was a form of a transformation to transformer. His humanity is a transformer to convey the power of God and bring it down to a level where we can embrace it, right? But he has his witnesses. So the light shines, but what God has is witnesses. And that's what we are. And John the Baptist was a witness, right? He came for a witness to bear witness of the light. Why didn't the light just shine? Well, why did they have to believe through John? Um, John's testimony concerning Christ was preparatory. There's one coming who's greater than I. I'm not even worthy to untie his shoelace, right? Everybody was coming to John. And this also is interesting because John was so coarse. He did not fit into society. God did not launch a charm offensive through John the Baptist. He was eating wild locusts and honey, most likely dirty, out in the wilderness, far away, inconveniently located, dressed in uh, skins, right? Goat skin, eating, not drinking, uh, and completely every bit the stereotype of a wild-eyed, schizophrenic, homeless guy out in the wilderness, if you think about it. And yet, all came to be baptized by him. What was the draw? He didn't do any miracles. It was his message. See, and this goes with a message I just gave about how Jesus is not ashamed to call us brother, and I was talking about how he chooses these obnoxious vessels. Because the world in its wisdom chose in its wisdom to not know God. And because the world in its strength and self-reliance, I said, refused to acknowledge its need for God, he chose the foolishness of preaching. And this proves that it is the Word that does the work. It's what John said, not who he was. Everything he was an offense to the natural man. Everything he was an offense to the senses. Yet he bore witness to the light. And his witness was a true witness. It wasn't adulterated. It wasn't... See, the fact that he ate wild locusts and honey really refers back to the principle of the Nazarite. The Nazarite in the Old Testament was like Samson was a Nazarite. They didn't cut their hair. They were not to engage in natural affections and natural enjoyment. They were set apart for God during times when the priesthood failed. The Nazarite vow was for a special circumstance when the priesthood was not functioning correctly. Someone would be like Samuel. His mom committed him to the Lord in a special way because the priesthood at that time was failing. Eli's eyes were being blinded. His kids were eating the sacrifices and raping the women. I mean, it was terrible what was going on. And God raised up Samuel. Samson was a Nazarite where he didn't let his hair be cut, and that was his downfall, right? Was eventually he succumbed to the pleasures of the flesh. The Nazarite is someone who's set apart from the pleasure of the flesh, is set apart from self-interest. And that's why uh, the you know the adulterous woman cutting his hair was so significant because she was breaking that special set aside sanctification that made him uniquely equipped to serve the Lord at a time of apostasy. And that's what John the Baptist was. He was a true Nazarite. And Jesus said, of all men, all that were born of women, none was greater than John the Baptist. And he said the law and the prophets were till John. He was the greatest of all the prophets, yet he did no miracles. But what was great about him was not him, but the message he bore. He was the forerunner to speak directly to the people about the one who is to come. He was a direct witness to the light and bore witness to the light and said, behold the Lamb of God, right, who takes away the sins of the world, and spoke of this one. And he was used miraculously to bring everybody out to be baptized And that baptism was a recognition that, you know, this is not business as usual. The priesthood is not taking care of things. The nation is in apostasy, really. None of our religious systems are working. Nothing we do is working. So this messenger is sent outside the system, apart from the system. The Pharisees don't know what to do about him. The priests don't know what to do about him. And yet he's speaking of this one who's to come. And this prophet has zero attractiveness. Civilized people would not go flock to see someone like this. And yet they did. Everybody came to the Jordan. And not only did they listen to him, but they were willing to be baptized. It's very difficult to get people to do anything. It's one thing to get them to come hear a message. It's another thing to get them to actually go into the water. I mean, come on. That was a miraculous, compelling work of God that God was doing through the Word. The light was shining through John, and John was a transformer so that light could be received without killing everybody. And he was shining so purely. Jesus called him a lamp burning in the wilderness. Uh, and yet, again, this shows us that it is not about us. It is not about how friendly we are. It is not about how loving we are. It's not about our virtues. It's not about our compassionate nature, our genteelness, our civility, our uh, ability to speak well. That's not the point. The point is the content of our message. And if we are true to the Word, the closer we are to the light, to really bear witness of the light we've seen, the more God can use us. It's not about what we are like. It's entirely about how faithful we are to the Word and how and accurately and undilutedly the light can shine through us. The light shined really clearly through John, even in his gross, coarse humanity. Uh, there was a supernatural, compelling power to attract everybody out to come and be baptized and come and listen and be prepared to believe in this one who was coming, right? He was not the light, but he was sent to bear witness of the light. That was the true light, which lights everyone that comes into the world. That's a pretty powerful statement that the Christ does enlighten everyone who comes into the world. You say, well, what about people who never heard the gospel? In some measure, everybody is accountable because, like I said, they have so many witnesses. They have the witness of their conscience excusing and accusing them, which shows that they have the work of the law written in their hearts, according to Romans 1, and shows that they understand intuitively that there's a judgment to come. And they have the witness of creation, which declares the glory of God. And I went through this in the Romans today. I'm not going to get into it too much. So that should bring you into crisis. That alone should cause you to seek. For you to be a person who does not seek to know God means that you are suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. You are suppressing the voice of the conscience. You are suppressing the witness of creation. Then there's the religions, and your conscience has to bear witness which one is true. What has the answer for my conscience? What is there remedy for my sin? There's a judgment coming. My conscience tells me there is something called righteousness, and there's an objective standard that if this is a just universe at all, there's got to be some accountability to something greater than myself, right? And that should cause you to seek. And Jesus said, all who seek him will find him. If you are seeking God, you will find him. But not everybody's seeking God. Many are seeking, self-glory. Man is religious by nature. It's part of his makeup. So man loves to be religious. It helps him be self-righteous. It helps him to be condemning of others. It gives him a moral authority to say, well, God showed me that I'm right. That's not the same thing as seeking God. And it is your conscience that leads you in this search. When your conscience condemns you, even when you're religious, then you start to go, okay, there must be something more to this because I'm still a sinner. And I know when I'm condemning others, I'm still condemning myself because I do the same things. That should eventually bring you, it prepares you to be ready to receive the message. And then God brings the gospel your way through a vessel. And that's what John was. He was a vessel that God sent to make people ready. The reason there was an emphasis on the repentance and remission of sin and the water of baptism was because people needed to be stirred up again for their need for salvation. And people were ready. They really were at this time. The nation was in captivity. They didn't have victory over their enemies. There was oppression. Herod was an Edomite Jew, so the king of their country wasn't even of the tribe of Judah. It was things were really bad, and they knew they were out of order. Plus, their own personal moral plight was terrible, and they knew it. So most people were able to receive this, except the religious people who were self-justified. So God sent this witness. But everybody is illuminated by Christ in some way. Now, whether they receive that illumination or not that is up to them if they harden themselves against that knowledge. He lightens every man that comes into the world, but not everyone receives him, right? He was in the world, and the world was made by him, but the world knew him not. And we know from Romans 1 that that's because we suppress the truth in unrighteousness. It's not because he has not declared himself. It's because we refuse to recognize his witnesses. We're not thankful for the creation we live in, and then we suppress the voice of our conscience and self-justify ourselves, that's a form of, all of that is a form of self-deception and lying that people do because of their sin nature. And God has to overcome that. That's the darkness in us. And that's why we don't know him, even though he made the world. He entered the world that he made, and the world knew him not. And he came unto his own, and his own received him not. So even those who are his own don't receive him. Everybody rejects Christ. There's nothing in you that makes you accept Christ. It is Christ overcoming the darkness in you. Because here it says, but as many as received him, to them he gave power to become the sons of God, even to those that believe on his name. Right? So, on the one hand, he came to his own. He was in the world, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own received him not. But then there were some who received him. How'd that happen? Well, he gave them power to become the sons of God, even to those who believe on his name, which were born, not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. Now, this is, the Arminians don't like this. The people who don't like predestination don't like this. Again, I'm not a Calvinist, but this is John, all the way through John, you see that there is a sovereign act of God, a supernatural overcoming act of God, where he has to overcome our darkness and overcome our resistance in order to birth us as his children by his power. You say, well, I believe the gospel because it made sense. No, you believe the gospel because God's supernatural overcoming power broke through the darkness and the light shined on you and your resistance was overcome and that power was released to birth you as a child of God. You were born of God, not of the will of man. You didn't choose this. Not of blood. It's not a genetic thing. Not of the flesh or the will of the flesh. This isn't about your strength or choice. A lot of people say, well, God knew I would choose him, so therefore he chose me. No, Jesus said, you didn't choose me. Now there it's talking about discipleship, but still, this is something of God. We have to recognize that. Yes, there is accountability. We can harden ourselves and not believe. We can harden ourselves and press into the darkness and not come forward to the light. But for those of us who do come to the light, it's because the light did something in us. And there was something of God's power to birth us. And we were born of God. We didn't just believe something, we were born. You might choose to believe something, but you can't choose to be born. Only parents can choose to have a child. And in humanity, it could be an accident, but in God, there is no accident. And He chooses to bring us forth as His children. James said that too, of His own will, He begat us of the word of truth, that we might be the first fruits of His new creation, His creatures, right? And the Word was made. Okay, maybe I should leave it. Yeah, let me just leave it there, okay? This is a meditation, not a study. All I'm doing is opening the Word and speaking. So if you're expecting a study, that's not really what this is. It's inspirational speaking. All right, have a good day.